This is another live stream. It's my third week of a 4-week yoga challenge, part of my In 4 Weeks program, where every 4 weeks I take on a new topic to make myself either healthier, wealthier, or wiser. And it's something that I want to capture my experience and provide for you as a gateway to explore each of these topics deeper. Yoga is a mirror to look at ourselves from within. My first experience with meditation was in church. I'm not saying that prayer and meditation are the same thing. They can sometimes have similar sensations and outcomes, but they are fundamentally different. As a teenager, meditation was introduced as a coping technique. My mind is often full of memories and ideas that pull me into the past or leave me dreaming about the future. Meditation has evolved from a remedy to a proactive exercise that balances and strengthens my own mental fortitude. Here's the question. How do you approach and experience meditation or mindfulness during your yoga practice? And this is what I explored on the first day of this third week. Integrating meditation is one way that I thought of in this process. Incorporating moments of stillness and introspection into the yoga practice to deepen my awareness and promote my mental clarity as I process through what was going on in my day. What were my kids doing? What challenges did I have? What was I looking forward to? What was I worried about? The second area that I explored meditation was with focusing techniques. And this is important for me because I'm easily distracted. And that include utilizing objects of focus, such as something like a candle. It's easy to simply right here, light a candle, smells good, but it's something that I can focus on visually. And as I get distracted, focus back on that spot. And it kind of moves a bit. I don't know, there's something primal about a flame that sort of helps me visually focus on something. You can also have a mantra, which isn't something that I subscribe to in the traditional sense. Sometimes it's what I feel that I need to hear the most. And usually it comes up naturally in yoga practice. So if I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, I'm worried about, my son was sick. He had a stomach bug this past weekend. And so I'm like, man, he's going to be okay. And just repeating that over and over again as a mantra helped me focus on that and focus on maybe a positive outlook as well, and to kind of help process some of the emotions that I'm having about it. And to cultivate that kind of concentration and facilitate the meditation process using one of those focusing techniques. And so the third one would be simply just observing the mind and where it's at. So developing the ability to witness thoughts. So I don't know if you've experienced this, you're sitting down, you're doing yoga, you're trying to stay focused, and just an intrusive thought shows up in your mind. Oh, I left that laundry in the wash and now it's going to get all musty and gross. I'm going to have to run it again. And just observing that thought or emotion without attachment, maybe letting it happen to you and then acknowledging it and letting that go. It allows for a greater presence and a deeper meditative experience, because if you're someone who is sitting there and having those intrusive thoughts and then chastising yourself or kind of beating yourself down over experiencing those, then it's not necessarily, it's not benefiting you. And so it's to take a meditative approach. It doesn't mean eliminating those altogether, but it means those happening to you, acknowledging those thoughts, and then being able to let them sort of drift away. I kind of picture it like a river where one does show up, you can acknowledge that it's there and then let it drift away. And another one will come, but to dwell on it, the dwelling is the hardest part. So those are 3 ways that I have personally been approaching my experience of meditation or mindfulness with my yoga practice. And really my first day, what I was focusing on and meditating on. So that's something that you can take home with you. And I want to hear what your approach is or your experiences are when it comes to your meditation practice and how it weaves into your yoga practice. Now for the second day, I was focusing more on my routines and distractions. And if there's any specific parts of my well-being that I'd like to focus on in the middle of the yoga practice. So to start off, here's a quote that I've been meditating on for the second day. Change is not something that we should fear. Rather, it is something that we should welcome. And again, these quotes come straight from the book Light on Yoga. I got a link down below if you'd like to check it out for yourself. It's essentially the modern book of, the Bible on modern yoga. I'm addicted to routine, and you can ask my wife, you can probably ask my young kids. They get that I do things on a routine basis. Routines, they're not good or bad on their own, but they can be something that holds you back. And I've seen a lot of people on podcasts and different things I listen to really start to dive deeper into this concept of routines maybe being a hindrance to your ability to do X, Y, or Z, or to function at the best peak ability. I can't get started without a cup of coffee in the morning. And that's one example. If I don't get 8 hours of sleep, my next day is ruined. I know I've heard that a million times. I can't go to dinner because my favorite show is on. That's just painful for me to hear out loud. Coffee, sleep, and entertainment, they're not bad things on their own. But if a creature comfort becomes more of a necessity or a crutch that you rely on, it can take away from your full life experience. Yoga can reveal some of those specific areas that have become a weakness through the day-to-day routines. Are there specific areas of your body or aspects of your well-being or elements of your routine day-to-day experience that you would like to focus on through your yoga practice? That's the question that I've been dwelling on for the second day of this week. Targeted asana practice was the first response that I came up with. And that's designing selected poses or sequences of poses that are going to address specific physical, emotional, or energetic needs. And there are some great resources out there to target very specific things that you're experiencing. And I really appreciate that about the program that I'm doing with Yoga with Adrian. And so there's a link down below for that one specifically of what I'm following for this 4-week experience. And each one of those has a one-word theme. Most of them seem like they're one word, and they all have a theme that's targeting something specific, either deconstructive or constructive. And so that's the first thing, is targeted practice. And frankly, you're on YouTube here, or you could go over to YouTube if you're on a different platform and find tons of resources. I mean, there seems like a near infinite number of programs. The second is self-care routines. And so this is incorporating therapeutic practices like restorative yoga, for example, or other forms of yoga to promote relaxation, rejuvenation, healing. So a few days ago, the program was, I was exhausted. I mean, my kids had a stomach bug, and my wife was sick, and I was running around, and it just so happens that the program for that day was a relaxation program where I think the whole thing was sitting down. I could not have asked for a better routine for that day. I mean, it was perfect timing, and I could have sought that out if that's what I needed. But those self-care routines can also be incorporated into your day-to-day, grind, into your day-to-day cycle of what you do, when you do it, why you do it. And being intentional about that is going to be something that spills over in a positive way to other aspects of your life. The third area, when I'm dwelling on specific areas of my body or my routine that I can help promote well-being, is the mind-body integration. So this shows up often as my third point to any question. And I wrap it up in this example as exploring the mind-body connection to understand the impact of whatever thoughts or emotions come up on my physical well-being and vice versa. So an example of this would be when I was growing up, and especially going into college or going into grad school, I learned something about myself, that I carry a lot of my stress in my shoulders and in my gut. And so I actually got like stomach ulcers just from the stress of going into some of those transition times. And so stress shows up in a very interesting way, unique ways for all types of people. And that's just how it appeared to me. And so knowing that and really acknowledging that and how those emotions and thoughts have impact my physical well-being, I can actually use that in reverse. And if I'm experiencing some GI issues, or if I feel a lot of tension in my shoulders, I can realize, I might actually be really stressed about something, and I might have something in my life that I'm maybe ignoring or not paying attention to that really should be acknowledged. And so sometimes, the cause and the symptom, that relationship can go both ways. So those are 3 different areas that I explored when I was thinking about the mind-body aspect and what could be revealed through my yoga routine as it relates to my well-being. The next day was all really focused on gratitude, which is something that I think it's a core tenet to what I like to teach about. It shows up in all areas, whether you're looking at your health, your wealth, or whether or not your whys are growing in those 3 areas. And when it comes to parenting, it can be an immense tool for huge growth. So the quote that I was digging into is, "Yoga is a dance between control and surrender." And I'm a dad, talk about it all the time. That's a big focus of this channel. And a lot of the stuff I put out is really for parents to help them grow healthy, wealthy, and wise. I'm a business owner. I'm a millennial. So I typically love control. I'm a dad, business owner, millennial. Love control, unfortunately have to always check myself on micromanaging, family members, friends, employees, that kind of thing. I definitely love control too much. It becomes a problem. And as I'm writing down these notes before talking, my almost 3-year-old son, again, had a stomach bug, and it was just clearly on my mind. It kind of wove itself into each example that I had throughout my entire week. And I was trying to meet the needs of him, this other person, while they're sick, and trying to do that for a toddler causes a lot of tension. And so I talked about stress earlier. I was carrying in my shoulders, maybe I was getting a little sick, but just from the stress of everything. And it's a worrying time to have a sick child. And if you know me and you've listened to any of this, I love to fix things, but some things have to work themselves out over time, which is a painful thing for me to have to swallow. It's a tough pill. And that's what his pediatrician says. That's what Google says as you frantically try to search for remedies for your sick child. I know any parent knows what that's like. And instead of indulging the desire to control the circumstance, I've been intentionally expressing gratitude as a response, no matter what messes I'm cleaning up off the floor. It feels a lot like some self-inflicted gaslighting, if I'm being completely honest. But saying out loud, "Thank you for showing me the mess," to my son seems much more effective in expressing and bringing gratitude into that space versus, "Oh no, you made a mess," or in a panic, like, "Walk away, get out of there." It's like I often react frantically, but the more intentional I was by thanking him in that context, not necessarily thanking for making the mess. I'd prefer that it didn't happen on the floor, but at least "Thank you for showing me," or "Thank you for X, Y, and Z." Coming up with a creative response that shows gratitude seemed to be helpful for me. So what role does gratitude play in your yoga practice? And how can you cultivate a sense of gratitude both on and off the mat? So here's a few ways that I explored that concept in my own experience this week. One is cultivating gratitude intentionally. And that's reflecting on your own body's abilities, your breath, the support of, if you have a teacher, maybe it's online, maybe it's in person, maybe you're doing yoga in a community with others, fostering a sense of appreciation and gratitude for those around you, for the context, for your ability to even access wherever you're getting your practice from. And so that's one opportunity. The second would be journaling. And so specifically gratitude journaling is deciding a time to sit down and write down, pen and paper, no technology, the moments of gratitude, acknowledging the positive aspects of life finding joy in simple pleasures. And if I would have a recommendation, it would be to write down 3 things a day. And so you can just go ahead and bullet point 1, 2, 3. And this is a great opportunity if you're processing this as a journey and you're joining me day in and day out for 4 weeks. This could be an element of it where at the very bottom, after you journal about this question, reflect on the quote, write down any notes about your experience with your routine and your practice as you go through a 4-week yoga journey together. Then write down 3 things you're grateful for at the very bottom, because if you end with gratitude, it's going to change the way that you approach whatever the next thing life has in store for you. That next day was really focused on how does yoga inspire you and help you celebrate yourself. And so the quote that really brought this up was from Light on Yoga. Again, link down below. You go ahead and get the book because it's really a rich experience. And the quote is, "Do not stop trying just because perfection eludes you." Now, I've been married for about 10 years now, and this has been the best 10 years of my life. And I'm confident the next 10 are going to be even better. Whole 100% confidence. And 10 years must be a landmark. Not just because we're in the double digits, but because when I look at a picture of me 10 years ago, I look young. And despite my best efforts, you can definitely see the aging in my physical face and my appearance, especially in the past couple of years after having kids. We have a Google Home display in our kitchen, and it just cycles through photos. And sometimes it even does a side-by-side, like this is you 5 years ago today, and this is you today. And I'm like, good Lord, man, things change. And I know that I won't be able to turn back the clock on aging, but I have room to grow for sure in my mobility and how I perceive myself. I have specific goals, and those fundamental physical goals are to be able to move freely, to be able to appreciate my body fully, and to accomplish my fitness goals consistently, whether or not it's having a specific mile time 1 month, or doing yoga every day for a month, or being able to touch my toes when all of a sudden I realize I can't because I haven't been paying attention to one of those areas of my life. So those are the 3 fundamental physical goals that I want to carry for the rest of my life. These are lifelong pursuits. How does yoga inspire you to embrace and celebrate your body regardless of its limitations or your perceived imperfections? So that's the key question here. And I've got 3 ways that I unpack that for myself. The first was my own body acceptance. Again, my second core fundamental physical goal is to appreciate my body, and shifting the focus from external appearance to the body's capabilities and functionality helps foster self-love and appreciation for one's own body. And so that's where move freely and appreciate my body, they go hand in hand. That's why it's number 1 and number 2 for my core goals. And so as I accept my body, it's not healthy to just look at the comparison of me from 10 years ago, but really to look forward and know what I want to be able to physically do 10 years from now. So that's the paradigm shift that's so important that I think everyone can benefit from. The second area is just simply compassionate self-talk, the voice that you hear inside your head, and to acknowledge and to curtail all the intrusive negative thoughts that come to all of us when it comes to our own self and our own body and our appearance and all that. And so cultivating positive self-talk, practicing it, challenging those negative body image perceptions, and specifically replacing them with affirmations of self-acceptance and self-worth. I'm not someone who is a proponent of manifestation. I don't think that telling yourself, think thin, and you'll just magically become thin. I think that if you are frustrated with a specific aspect of your body and you want to curtail whatever habits led to that, really focusing on the positive aspects and really focusing on your positive aspects is going to help with not just your self-worth, but also with the journey that you're on, the trajectory towards your growth and whatever you want to see happen for you. So the third area is being in community with others. So when it comes to being able to embrace and celebrate yourself, honestly, sometimes the best way to do that is to surround yourself with people that want to celebrate you. And it seems like a crazy notion, but especially post-pandemic, being in the physical presence and surrounding oneself with a supportive community that embraces who you are, inside, outside, all the above, is going to be the most fundamental catalyst for you to continue on your journey with whatever your goals are, with whatever your experience is, wherever you're coming from and wherever you want to be headed. And so it's quantifiable. Now, people that go and they work out with other people, that they're on their fitness journey, they could even have different goals, but they do it in the presence of others, not just with accountability, but just with the specific presence of other people to support you, is quantifiably a big game changer. And so it's the reason why CrossFit is so popular, is because people go in person to their gym and on a consistent basis go through that experience together with other people. And the key is consistency with the same people, the same place. They're doing something different every time. That's the design of it. But to do it with the same people is the most important part. On this next day, my key exploration was through any specific yoga poses that really resonated with me. And the quote that brought this up is, "Yoga allows you to find a new kind of freedom that you may not have known have ever existed." Now, a few years back, I was training for my first Ironman race. Big into endurance athletics, and so Ironman, swim, bike, run, and the run's marathon distance. In typical fashion, I bit off more than I could chew, and I ended up injured when I started this training process. And it was specifically due to my deadlift technique. That's not important, but it's a key factor in my whole recovery arc. So yoga was central to my recovery. I slowly recovered over 6 months with the support of trainers, and specifically one physical therapist who was an all-star. And all of their advice, it still relates deeper and deeper as I explore yoga through these few weeks. I just see things keep coming back up over and over again. Many poses in yoga and many routines complement the intensive work that I experienced in recovery, and they remain relevant today. Especially I can feel them in my hip where I had the injury, where I can continue to work through some of that and really gain new ground, especially as I do this consistently every single day. And so the question here is, are there any specific yoga poses for you, or specific sequences or routines that resonate deeply with you? And here's 3 ways to really think about that and to unpack that question and go one level deeper. So the first one is personal affinity. Some of us just really like a specific pose because it feels good. And identifying poses that provide a sense of grounding that you can return back to, or expansion or empowerment, resonate with individual preferences and experiences. And I'm doing this live stream here and recording this standing up because mountain pose is very resonant with me. I'm a tall, straight, skinny guy. And so when I stand up like this, I really feel an affinity for that and regaining my posture. So the second area to unpack any specific poses and go one level deeper would be your energetic connection. And so this is exploring poses that activate specific energy centers. And so you have all these chakras in yoga, from your, top of your head down to the bottom of your core. And they facilitate a harmonious flow of energy through the body. And so, without going too deep into that, maybe that's a little too woo-woo for you, or maybe that's your favorite thing about yoga. But regardless, there are specific parts of your yoga practice that can help really energize you. And so I mentioned a few days ago how I needed one day to really rest and recover. And it just so happens that the routine that day was specifically tailored for recovery. And I think I was sitting the whole time. So really in the routine, Yoga by Adrian, and the one that I was following, was talking about how this is about your root chakra at the very base of you. And I mean, we're literally sitting on the ground, so it makes sense. And that really energized me and helped connect me to the practice in that way. The final way for you to have a lens of looking at the different poses and which ones really resonate with you is that mind-body integration. This is often the third way that I look at any one of these questions, is looking at the mind-body connection and selecting poses that evoke maybe an emotional release or promote mental clarity. You enter into a pose, and when you get really settled in, just like the fog clears. Or maybe it creates a deep sense of relaxation, like literally, I think it's called corpse pose, where I'm just laying on the ground. Couldn't be more relaxing than that at the very end of a whole sequence of yoga poses. And restorative poses, stuff that you can return back to and help recenter yourself in the midst of a sequence or just in the midst of a long day. And so these are 3 different ways that I think you can unpack and identify which specific yoga poses resonate deeply with you. Now, this next day was more of a philosophical day when it came to the question that I was wrestling with within yoga. And so it started with this quote: "The art of teaching is tolerance. Humbleness is the art of learning." And in college, a few years back, I spent a summer in Sweden. And as a born and raised Tennessee boy from the South, there was bound to be some culture shock in this sort of coming of age travel experience over the course of the summer. And I found their love of coffee especially endearing. I generally almost always have a cup of something caffeinated on my desk at any given time. But before arriving in Sweden, locals in the group that I was with encouraged me to take the posture of a learner. And that phrase really resonated with me, and it's something that I explored through that time, and I'll never forget it. And that posture of a learner really showed up in all interactions with people that I was familiar with or people that was brand new. Now, if I approached each experience with humility, I found that if I had an open mind, both I and the locals that I was interacting with would have a better experience all around. And sometimes that showed up as I'm going to what they call fika, which is basically mid-afternoon coffee break, and everyone seems to shut down. It's kind of like a siesta, but instead of taking naps, everyone goes to coffee shops, gets a cup of coffee and pastry, and just chit-chats with friends, which was the best. I suggest you look it up, internalize it, and try to incorporate it into your day-to-day routine, because it was rejuvenating and I loved it. And I just had to be open to that. And maybe it meant that I had a hard time sleeping that night. The sun didn't really go down during the summer in Sweden, but really embracing it, it kind of imprinted on me and affected the way that I approach my day-to-day routine as I came back here. Even years later, I still love to have a nice fika in the afternoon. So how can you integrate the philosophy of yoga, including all the poses, routines, and mantras, into your everyday decision-making and interactions? How can it inform how you interact with the world in a practical, real way? So there's 3 different ways to unpack this, and one is an ethical way. And so in the first approach, the first lens is applying principles such as honesty, integrity, doing no harm, to cultivate a conscious decision-making process. And it really integrates into how you make decisions. It's okay, Dallas. How you're integrating into your decision-making and your personal values. The second lens to look at this and unpack this question is in mindful choices. So the first was ethics and how you approach a question or a decision. And the next way is how you engage with that decision itself. Mindful choices, considering what the potential impact or consequences of your actions or decisions on yourself, on others, on your loved ones, on people that you just met, and fostering a sense of responsibility and compassion in your daily interactions. So this is something that if there was ever a place for this to resonate, it would be on social media. So making mindful choices about what you say, what you promote out there into the world, it's something that it seems to be waning. It seems to be going down in the world on a generalized scale. And so maybe yoga is a way that through this practice and being conscious on the mat can help you make more mindful choices off the mat. Maybe it's at work or at the dinner table or on your cell phone. The third lens is self-reflection, looking internally and regularly examining your thoughts, intentions, and behaviors and making adjustments to align with the ethical principles of yoga. So this is one where really looking at yourself with compassion. I want to really emphasize that compassion part because it seems like most people today have a lower threshold for being able to care for oneself. And this is a generalized sense. Maybe you do great at this, but generally speaking, a lot of us, including myself, really struggle with honoring oneself compassionately and being able to reflect on oneself in a way that is constructive rather than deconstructive. And so these are all three different lenses to really approach this question. I want to hear from you how you can integrate some of these philosophical concepts from on the mat to off the mat in your everyday life. Finally, the ultimate aim of yoga is to reach liberation. That's a quote that I was wrestling with on this final day of this experience. We're in week 3 of a 4-week journey through yoga as I dive deeper into this practice and then hopefully help you approach it. And again, our goal with any of this content that I create is to become more healthy, wealthy, and wise. And people all over the world are certainly being held back from seen and unseen forces. So if you're listening to this, or if you're reading this, or if you're watching this, the oppression that you experience is probably measurably different than it would be 100 years ago. And that's something definitely to be celebrated. Life was harder 100 years ago on average for most people. But it's important not to overlook that everyone's on their own journey of liberation, okay? And I view yoga as one of the many methods available to us to continue further on that journey. That next step, it often starts on the mat. And where you begin your practice each and every day is crucial to your mindset as you get into that practice and where you physically do it. And so it's a big concept, this exploration of freedom and what externally is holding you back. And it's something to really dwell on. But the question is, how do you physically create a sacred and intentional space for your yoga practice, whether it's at home or out in public in a studio somewhere? And there's 3 ways to really look at that, 3 lenses to unpack a sacred and intentional space for you. The first is decluttering. This has got to be the most obvious. Clearing a physical space from any distractions and creating an environment that promotes focus and tranquility. And so this is one where, I really was thinking about this. And if you look at the series that I'm following with Yoga with Adriene, her corner of her room that is very minimal, very clean, and has Benji, her dog, there, is something that there's just all these elements that kind of are harmonious. And that harmony is definitely something to be sought after, and something that I would want for myself or anyone else that I was encouraging to go on a 4-week deep dive into yoga with. The second lens to look through is setting intentions. So with this one, establishing a purpose or a theme for each practice session and bringing awareness and mindfulness to the mat. And so when I look at setting intentions, I really think about, having a theme. And if it can be a 1-word theme, the simpler, the better. And so that's what I really also appreciate with the program that I'm following. You can check out the link down below and jump right in and follow along with that program with Yoga with Adriene, because she has a 1-word theme for just about every single one of these practices, and even the overarching 30-day experiences as well. So setting your intentions and focusing, and that's why I've created each of these questions and quotes to have something to dwell on, to meditate on, to unpack through the yoga practice. And finally, the third lens is personalization, because this is a personal experience, and adding in elements like a candle to focus on, like we talked about at the beginning of this week, or incense to help focus, your other senses visually, smell, touch, the temperature of the room, the airflow, meaningful objects to infuse a space with. These are all can be potential sacred inlets for personal connection with your own practice. So I encourage you to really dive deep into wherever you are on that spectrum with your own sacred and intentional space for doing yoga, and really use these three lenses to help unpack that for yourself.